Good morning, everyone. Today I'll be reviewing one of the most groundbreaking and one of the most popular graphic novels of all time, written by Frank Miller, the greatest writer and comic artist of all time. Uh, the novel is called The Dark Knight Returns, and the story is about a futuristic dystopian Gotham City. Years after Bruce Wayne has retired from being Batman, he's old, he's bitter, he's emotionally isolated and haunted by the death of his, former sidekick Robin, aka Jason Todd. Crime has reached an all-time high and Gotham is terrorized by this brutal gang known as the Mutants and their leader. Bruce can no longer ignore the violence, and despite his age and the time that he's taken off, he decides to put the cowl back on and go to war on crime. The story is divided into four parts. The first part is called The Dark Knight Returns, which is the name of the graphic novel itself. This is when Batman is triggered, his return is triggered by the return of Harvey Dent, who is cured and let out into the world, but devolves back to a life of crime. And when Batman puts the cowl back on, saves some people, and gets to him, and in their final battle, when Batman defeats him, he realizes that even though Two-Face was cured and his face was reconstructed, he still sees himself as a broken man on the inside. And it solidifies his idea that even though Gotham may look like it's a lot better on the outside, just like Two-Face on the inside, it's just as broken, if not more. And this confirms that Batman needs to be back to, fulfill the mission that he once left behind 10 years ago. The second part, known as The Dark Knight Triumphant, this is where Batman confronts the mutant gang leader, and who is this monstrous, sadistic leader looking for just violence and chaos. And Batman is nearly killed in their first fight because he underestimates him and overestimates his age and ability, like he's young again. And so, you see the return of the original Batman, where in the second fight, he not only, isn't just relying on his strength, he's using tactics, he's using environments, he's using everything to defeat him, like the original Batman, the man with the highest intellect. And in this process, he also ends up finding a new sidekick, which is this woman called Carrie Kelly, who's saved by him initially when he returns as the Batman. And so he defeats the mutant leader in front of all his disciples and breaks the gang into other smaller gangs, majority of which is now called the Sons of Batman. The third part, my favorite part, basically in this, Batman's return awakens his greatest enemy, the Joker, who's been catatonic for years, not even moving a finger. He suddenly snaps back to life, manipulates his doctor to appear, letting him appear on a talk show, murders everybody on the talk show, escapes. And so Batman and Joker go through this cat and mouse chase through the city and end up in the tunnel of love, where Batman killed his old sidekick, the thing that really haunts him. And in there's this huge brutal fight where Joker confirms how he won the battle that he wanted to fight throughout the years. And Batman, even though he didn't kill him, only just stops just short of killing him. But in the final act of spite, Joker twists the remainder of his own neck, ends up killing himself, and making it look like to the world that Batman finally crossed the line and killed him, and that he's no better than Joker himself, which has been his entire fight. Then the fourth part comes in, and this is where the global tensions are rising. This is the part where Superman becomes a major character in the story. Batman and Superman go off against each other because the president isn't happy about the fact that the vigilantes are coming back again. He tells Superman to kill him. There's this huge fight. Batman shows his true intellect by weakening Superman down, strengthening himself so that he can be on par with an alien like him, and in the final moments defeating Superman and making him believe that he has died, and in the final words telling him that I could have fully killed you right now if I didn't want to, so stay out of my way. And as soon as he says that, Batman ends up dying of a heart attack, but at the funeral he realizes, what? Something's wrong. Superman realizes something isn't right. And sure enough, he suddenly hears a heartbeat coming out of the grave. And he realizes Bruce just faked his death. But he says nothing to anybody and walks away. Now, this has been my favorite Batman story of all time because not only does it address what happens to the world when he's gone, it shows you how important his character is in the universe of DC characters, how important Batman is to the city that he lives in, how each person that plays a role with him plays a significant role, and how he has always been this solo lobo kind of character, but now in his old age, when he decides to actually go through and fulfill the mission he took up when he became the Batman, he needs the help of everybody around him. And it's my favorite story, because not just because it addresses so many things. I think it puts a very nice little bow at the end of Batman's journey. It also leaves room for a sequel, and I think there will be one, which was recently announced, but we'll see when we get to that. But the story just neatly packs everything. It tells you why Batman's important. It tells you why he does what he does. It tells you why he's always been a vigilante and never truly seen as like a superhero like all his other mates, in the Justice League. It talks about how heroes are not really necessary because we have law enforcement and everything, so why have heroes who are breaking and being above the law. It tackles the issues of how society will always have villains as long as there is a superhero, and it will always have superheroes as long as it has villains, and how both exist in a yin and yang. It talks about superheroes going rogue. It talks about superheroes turning evil. It addresses all the real world issues, and the book did this back in 86 when nobody was even thinking about this, the golden age of DC superheroes. And the greatest story to come out of it talks about how we don't need them anymore, talks about the end of their lives, and about how we are just as responsible for the crimes as Batman is responsible for having those villains appear. And it's the perfect balance. And so I think that no greater book for this character has ever been written. And it clearly shows with the amount of readers and the amount of sales this book has had over the past couple of decades. And the fact that it is now more relevant than ever, considering how the world is pretty much turned on each other, and the war between the US and the Soviets is starting to reignite, and how there's a war starting like initially between them with just talks, and it devolves into a nuclear war because these worldly superpowers now have a nuclear advantage. So it addresses a lot of those issues. It addresses how society has to function when there's no one to save us, and it talks about how chaos isn't exactly always the answer, even though it always is the easiest answer. And that's why I've been a fan of the book for quite a while. I also have a tattoo of the same Batman symbol that is used in the comic books. And yeah, that was my review for The Dark Knight Returns. Thank you so much, everyone.